What's going on, guys? So we are back, continuing our coverage of Immortal Thor with issues 20 and 21, where now not only is Thor getting closer to his impending death, but also this gives us an even better explanation to why Scourge is trying to steal it from Thor again, and why that means so much to Scourge. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so getting back into Immortal Thor with issue 20 and 21. This picks up on what we saw when Sif left her post to go get Thor to tell him that Toronos has been delivered to Asgard. And at the time, this brought an abrupt end to Thor's conversation with his mother Freya, with it being said it was a terse goodbye to the one who raised him. And though Thor knew it not then, it was the last, for this was the beginning of the end. Which again just feeds into what we were told about this being the beginning of Thor's final adventure. So when Thor gets to Asgard, he finally sees what Sif was talking about as far as Toronos being delivered. Because when they get here, Toronos is nailed to his wheel. And the first thing that Thor hears him say is, "Help me." And as he weeps, his storm and his lightning are just getting even more aggressive. So at first, Thor's like, nah, not in Asgard, not in my house. So as the Allfather and the Master of Storms, Thor tells this storm to cease. But nothing happens, and Thor remembers that this is no different than the first time he fought Toronos, as far as Thor not being able to control it, because that's when Thor first realized that this thunder is not his to command, because it's loyal to Toronos. But on top of that, he realizes the reason why this storm and all this lightning is going crazy, it's because they've come to mourn Toronos. So immediately Thor approaches, asking Toronos to speak to him and tell him what's going on, and you can tell the big guy's kind of out of it, because at first he's like, "Asa, Thor." Almost as if Toronos didn't realize he was in Asgard already. So when Thor asks why did he return and why is he here, the first thing Toronos tells him is, "In your heart, you know Thor, but you hope it's not true. You are a being of compassion, compassion that you infected me with like a plague when I gained thy accursed power. This is not my doing, Thor. It is yours. It is yours." And what Toronos is talking about here is referencing back to Immortal Thor issue 5, when Thor brought in Storm, Beta Ray Bill, Jane Foster, and Loki, and they all passed Mjolnir around, so they each could use Thor's power for 60 seconds or something like that. So when Loki passed Mjolnir to Toronos, Thor deemed him worthy to wield his power, which at the time was this huge plot twist, when Thor explained that his power is to hold the storm back, with compassion, restraint, with nobility, with hard-won wisdom, and with humility. And those were traits that had changed Toronos ever since. And Thor understands that part. But aside from that, Thor looks at the nails that have been driven into Toronos, and he's like, "Yeah, but I didn't do this." So Toronos basically tells Thor that he knows that answer as well too. So from here, he tells Thor how he ended up like this. And as it turns out, with Toronos being infected with Thor's compassion, when he returned back to Utgard, because Toronos had all of this compassion in him, he tried to get all the other Utgard gods to see the righteousness in Thor's cause. We're told that he argued, he pleaded, and even begged the other Utgard gods to see Thor's side and show mercy. The only problem was there was no mercy in them, so they showed absolutely none towards Toronos, because it says here, "The endless city forged steel that could pierce an elder god's flesh. The great bull gored him and knocked him to the ground. The hooded one took up the hammer, and under Utgard Loki's mocking eye, they nailed him to the wheel, because they said if Toronos can no longer be their messenger, then he'll become their message." So they basically just sentenced this guy to death. And when Toronos tells Thor all of this, Thor knows that he can't prevent it. All Thor can really do is just put him out of his misery. So Toronos agrees, but then he's like, "First, I gotta give you the message." With the message being the black bridge Thor and Loki used years ago that took them to Utgard land, it's returned. And the gate that's on the other side of that bridge that leads to Utgard, it's gonna open soon. And someone's gonna pass through, one way or the other. Which right there lets Thor know that he's got to go back. And as far as what Toronos is talking about, as far as Thor and Loki crossing the Black Bridge, this is referring to what we saw in Immortal Thor issue 6, where we saw Loki and Thor relive the story of their first time traveling to Utgard, which we covered at the time, and I have the link to the full playlist in the description. But this was one of those cases where, with everything Al Ewing is doing in Immortal Thor, with the emphasis on Thor's fate and his story, as well as Loki playing the role that he needs to along the way, issue 6 had some additional details that took the details from Thor issue 272, and it gave us this crazy twist of how Utgard Loki was also involved. And it just came together so perfectly, because aside from everything Thor's dealing with, and his time with Utgard Thor coming to an end, in the background there's also this bout between Asa Loki and Utgard Loki, where we have yet to see which one will be the true teller of tales. And that's about to ramp up pretty soon. But at this time, after Toronos has given his message, Thor honors his request and he slays the Elder God, To where next, Thor gives Toronos' storm clouds his condolences. And just after this, he has a brief talk with Sif before they head to his hall, gather his magical weapons, and make their way to the Black Bridge at the edge of Asgard, which Thor also refers to here as the opposite of the Rainbow Bridge, with the Rainbow Bridge leading to all realms and the Black Bridge leading to none. But just before Thor leaves, Sif notices that he's talking like he's not gonna come back. So right away she offers to go with them. Then she's like, better yet, let's bring everybody. Balder, Jane, Bill, Hercules, the mortal Avengers. Cause I mean, they just some mortals, you know what I'm saying? And she tells him here, countless warriors across countless worlds would give their lives for thy sake. And I mean, I don't know about you, but if somebody called me to give my life for the Immortal Thor, I'd have been like, I think he'd be alright. I mean, I'm just going off the name. But Thor just tells Sif the same thing that he told his mother when he let her know about Thanos, because he tells her that he won't let them. And I mean, one reason is because they would give their lives, but also not too long ago, Thor made a vow to not let any other life be given or taken to prolong his own. So because he made this vow and because he knows any of them would give their lives, Thor tells her that he can't allow it. So to shut Thor up for a moment, Sif just pulls him in for a kiss. And I mean, there's also a bit of what we talked about before, with Sif's feelings for both Thor and Bill being stirred up lately after the arrival of Magni. So there's some of that too. But just before Thor leaves, he tells her that she's a good friend and that he will see her again. So as Thor's walking off, Sif's yelling in the background like, glad to know it. That was no kiss goodbye, Thor. Though at the same time, we're told Thor had spoken true. Though neither of them knew it, he would see Sif again. Once more at least. But Sif, though she hoped, though she prayed, to whatever god a god may pray to, had just then spoken a lie. And a moment later, he was gone. Vanished into the mist that shrouded the Black Bridge. Vanished from her sight. To where then Sif is like, please Thor, do not make that our goodbye. With Thor crossing the Black Bridge, this takes him to the Darkwood once again. And it's here where Thor thinks to himself, 'tis as I recall it. Yet, where once I felt the call to adventure, now I only feel a chill of foreboding. Before I came with Loki as a sidekick and sibling. But where's Loki now? Far from my sight, yet still narrating events? No doubt. As my skald or as my enemy? Still, though I am alone, I have my weapons about me. Tormod, axe of my wit, and while Utgard, that is my endurance. And Mjolnir makes 3 of course, greatest of hammers, oldest of my tools. Together they should be enough. And the narration says here, but Thor was wrong, and twice over. Mjolnir did not make 3. Thor had but 2 magical weapons he would need. And Thor was not alone in the dark wood. And that's where he hears a voice say, Thor, look upon me, All-Father. I have tasted your death once, and one way or another, the executioner will taste it again. And when Thor looks up, he sees Scourge right in front of Utgard's gate with his new weapon, the Blood Axe, and Thanos standing right behind him. But everything here isn't exactly as it would seem, and we'll come back to this in a moment. But before we do, the next thing we get here is a more in-depth explanation to why Scourge is doing what he's doing, as far as stealing Thor's death again and why this means so much to him. Because when Scourge originally took Thor's place, this took Scourge from being your quote-unquote half-wit or lackey, and we're told here that this moment allowed Scourge to rewrite his own story. Because in the past, when we've talked about Scourge taking Thor's death, initially, since then, he's come back on numerous occasions, because at the time it was like he earned the title of noblest of them all. So when Asgard needed help against Hell, he showed up. When Hell needed help against Heaven, he'd show up. And at one point, the narration, or Loki says, how could the noblest of all refuse aid to anyone who inquired? And if not just for battle, at times it was just to see an old friend. But over the years, with every breath of life Scourge took, his hold on Thor's stolen death grew weaker. And it wasn't until recently when Scourge completely lost his grasp of it. And you can think of it like that connection between Scourge and Thor that started when he first stole Thor's death. It was being pulled in 2 different directions for a long time. And with Scourge coming back numerous times and making it weaker, that just made it easier to break when Thor's new impending death came into the picture. And back when Scourge lost Thor's death, like we talked about before, he went to Odin, who had made Valhalla, who was also there himself after his death, and that's where Odin sent Scourge back through the back door he created with the assignment of doing this to save Thor. And this was something that we saw a couple years back in Al Ewing's Avengers Incorporated, I want to say it was, because around that time when Odin told the story, I'm pretty sure he left out the part about snapping on Scourge, because Scourge didn't think Odin could do it since Scourge had left so many times prior to. And that's in addition to the fact that Odin can't leave, he can only allow others to leave by killing them in Valhalla. But it's a one-off thing, because once this happens, when Scourge dies again, he can't go back to Valhalla, he can't go to Hell. The only thing waiting for him will be Vid Blaine, the sleep with no waking, the true end. So again, for Odin, this is him trying to save his son and his legacy. And for Scourge, in his case, he wants to take from Thor the glory that Scourge believes he's earned. And I'm sure you might be looking at this and thinking, if Scourge wants to take Thor's death, why does it look like he's trying to take Thor's life? And the reason why Scourge is here ready to fight Thor and he went through the trouble of getting Ullr to make the blood axe, it's because he doesn't need Thor in one piece. He just needs Thor alive. And with Thor seeing Thanos here, Scourge can neither see or hear him. So when Thor is like, wait, Thanos? He only sees and hears the two of them. So he doesn't hear what this Thanos tells Thor. Oh no, nothing so small as that. But right now, with Thor still trying to figure out who he's talking to, he's still got to focus on Scourge. Because as far as motivations go, Scourge has put everything on getting this glory back. Because again, the next time he dies, that's it for him. And Thor thinks to himself like he notices this too. And behind Utgard's gate, this Thanos responds to Thor's thoughts, telling him things like if anyone can chop Thor to pieces, Scourge can. So that's when Thor tells Scourge like, hey man, Thanos is right behind you. But Scourge only sees it as a terrible attempt to distract him, because again, he can't see or hear Thanos. And the main reason why is because this voice or this projection is taking on the appearance of the face that Thor associates with his own death, which is basically what these two guys are fighting over. And it tells Thor that's why Scourge can't see him, because he hasn't earned it. And with Thor going back and forth between the two of them, there's one point where Thanos tells Thor like, will you raise your hand against this noble god, this hero of Asgard, brave, loyal Scourge, who only ever sought to take the burden from you, which then has Thor telling Scourge it's not his burden to take. So when Thor begs and later on commands Scourge to lower his axe, which is basically Thor pulling rank here, Scourge sees this as Thor either giving him an easy way out or asking him to be a coward, and Scourge is not having it. So again, on both sides, both of them are protecting their word. Though in Thor's case, it's to save the people that he cares for, while on the other hand with Scourge, he's really doing this for himself, and he's willing to do it by any means necessary. And we find out here, in addition to Scourge's deal with Odin, and I wouldn't even say a deal so much as it is Scourge accepting the terms of this resurrection, because it's not like there was any bargaining going on. But now with Scourge facing the fate of eternal sleep, with no heaven, no hell waiting for him, this glory or his name, they're the only two things that are going to be left behind. And we find out here in the case of his blood axe that he had Ullr make. When Scourge strikes Thor in his chest, he tells him that it's tied to his soul, and the more blood that it tastes, the stronger Scourge becomes. But on top of that, if Scourge were to fall in battle, the blood axe would also take his blood and his life. So he tells Thor here, I will have my death today, one way or the other. But to me, it's like between the magic and Scourge's blood axe, as well as the terms of his resurrection, it almost seems like one will be a loophole for the other, but who knows, we'll see. And as the fight goes on, Scourge gives Thor the ultimatum, which is either for Thor to let Scourge travel with him to Utgard and take his death, or for Thor to kill Scourge himself. And while this is going on, the Thanos construct is just instigating, like, yeah Thor, what are you gonna do? So again, Thor tries to tell Scourge that he can just walk away from this, but Scourge is just like, and go home with my tail between my legs and be Scourge the fool once more? I will not let you take this death, or take the glory. So Thor's basically like, to hell with my glory and yours. All that matters is the mortals the mad Utgard gods would destroy. So again, this Thanos construct chimes in, or Thor's death as he would see it, and it asks him if the mortals are even worth it, because they really don't care about Thor or themselves. Between light and dark, they usually choose darkness, and it even refers to the mortals as a self-hating disease. And it even manages to throw Scourge in there by basically saying that he's just as much of a lost cause. But this is what leads to Thor explaining why he's not giving up on either. And Thor starts with humanity, because when Thor's death tells him that he shouldn't bother dying for humanity when humanity chooses to kill the world, and that's why they deserve the consequences, that's what Thor's like, and what does a child deserve? And what about those who fought tooth and nail and still fight? Thor's like, should I give up before them? And it takes Thor into this speech where he's like, it doesn't matter if there's just 1,000 on Earth, or 100, or 10, or just one. Thor's like, I will battle to the end for them, and they for me. To say otherwise is to give up. And in a way, with Thor saying that, it's almost like he's telling himself that he should handle this whole situation with Scourge differently, because he's literally been saying otherwise when it comes down to the idea of fighting for one another. And it clicks for Thor when he says, I will not give up, Thanos. I cannot give up. We cannot give up. And that's when he turns around, looks at Scourge, and hands him Mjolnir, while assuring him that this is no trick, and instead admitting that Scourge was right, and that he shouldn't take this decision from him. And now with Scourge seeing this as Thor shaming him a bit, Thor just tells him, as you shamed me, I mislike being coddled like an infant. My father sent you to me for that very purpose, and it rankled me. And he tells Scourge how he basically did the same thing to Sif back when Thor crossed the Black Bridge, when he told her to stay behind because he feared for her safety. And that's almost like trying to control her fate. And now Thor realizes that it's not his place, even as Allfather. to make these decisions for others. And really, it all comes together nicely, especially when you think of the reoccurring theme of someone rewriting their own story. Because for one, when that story involves someone else, you gotta let them make their own decisions. Because when you're trying to control someone else's fate, it doesn't matter if it's a righteous cause like Thor's or a selfish one like Scourge, because the fates are gonna chime in either way. And I really like how Thor paints the picture here, especially when he says, "But who is even the Allfather to make such edicts? Who am I to tell you no, Scourge? A king may command the sea, a warrior take his axe to the crashing waves, but the tide still comes in. The fates will have their say." Because I think it's also important to point out that the fates are having their say and not so much their way. But then it's right here where the Utgard gate opens, as Thor goes on to say, and there are forces to which even a god must bow, but not yet. And that's where this Thanos says no, not yet, just before he disappears. And when they go in, first they travel through the deep woods, just like Loki and Thor did back in Thor issue 272, where these woods are constantly changing. So Thor lets Scourge know that this is how Utgard is. This place can change as quickly as any tale. And at one point, Thor even says we've transcended from prose to poetry, from hard truth to floating and flowing metaphor. So it's very much like them stepping from one storyteller with one format in their own motive to a whole nother land outside of theirs where anything could happen. And the only advice that Thor can really give Scourge here is that their magic weapons will be useful, but even still they have to stay alert. And when the deep woods changes into this thick fog, at first Scourge compares it to the mists of hell. So he's like, "I'm familiar with this, I'll guide you through it, Thor." But Thor just tells him what happened when him and Loki were here, because they started in the deep woods as well. The mists eventually came, and later on they found themselves in Utgard Hall. But this time the mist grows thicker instead of thinner, and it's followed by this invisible barrier that closes in on them. And it's right there where Thor realizes that they've been lured into a trap that expected Thor to go by his memory. And now that the trap's already sprung, this is where Thor sees that they're not on the road to Utgard Loki's Hall. They're already there. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments as far as what you think about the whole Scourge versus Thor thing. Because we talked about it some back when Scourge was helping Dario Agger, but at this point in the story, I feel like it's giving a much better and clearer explanation to Scourge's motivations, whether they be right or wrong. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.